I'm fine. How are you?
All right. So we are now officially live, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Deezer, and yeah, we're about to have some fun. Let's get into some good conversation. I'm gonna start out with my brother, Charles Stokes, because my brother. Boy, you want to talk about somebody being hunted?
Uh,
Listen, they say if you ain't being hunted by them folks in mainstream, that means you really ain't doing anything. They said any warrior for our community that lives to reach the age of 90 peacefully mean that they really wasn't doing a lot of work and didn't cause much panic. I just heard that somewhere. I thought that made a lot of sense. I remember my brother said it on the air one time. So, all right. So what I'm gonna do is give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. We'll start with top right, brother Keith.
how's everyone doing tonight?
Man, I woke up breathing in black. I'm good.
Yeah. Keith Dodds, doctoral candidate for psychology, education, mental health counseling. That's me, all the way.
All right, brother
Professor,
Garrett.
also. Let's throw that in there.
Professor.
Yep.
All right, Professor. Hey, I ain't got no problem. I love that. I've been claiming your doctor professor name before you was a doctor and a professor. So I'm just, brother Gary, quick intro.
Yeah, just Gary Porter from the African Diaspora Mental Health Association, the concerned citizen, and somebody that believes strongly in post-traumatic slave syndrome and that being the panacea for Black mental health.
Okay, that's what's up. Minister Charles Stokes.
My name is Brother Minister Charles Stokes. I am the minister of the Hope Under God Life in Christ Ministries. And I'm also the founder of Black Liberation Alliance for Change. And I'm also representing BCP for life. That's it. And so nobody don't know, BCP is Burden Circle Projects.
I'm from Berkeley Heights Projects down in Waterbury, man. I don't know much about Berkeley.
I thought you were saying BDP, Boogie Down Productions.
Nah, BCP.
All right, brother. So, we were supposed to talk about some things with Keith. I know you have the whole thing.
Yeah.
But before we get started with that, brother Charles, man, why don't you tell everybody you want to come on? There's some things you want to talk about.
Yeah, I thank you first and foremost again.
Hold on, let me finish this. Now,
Okay, I'm sorry.
before I bring you on, I gotta say this. It's like why keep secrets, right? Okay, so there are folks out in the community. I'm gonna say out in the community. I'm gonna say from my community, but out in the community who look like me, same color and all that stuff, who have major issues with us opening the doors and the microphones to other folks from our community. And they're saying that I'm allowing people to abuse a platform that I created over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Actually, it doesn't make sense. You're articulating it well, but the concept doesn't make sense.
All right. So I just wanted to make you've known me for over 30 years. So I'm like, I didn't know I was being exploited or taken advantage of. So there are people who feel like, you're allowing certain people access to your platforms and, you shouldn't do that. Now, these same people don't invest. They don't support anything. They don't come out to anything. They don't do anything. Right.
Nope.
And they said, by allowing people access to your platforms, it's as if you are aligning yourself with them. I told you there were 7 boys. My parents raised 7 boys, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't always agree. We didn't always get along.
Uh-huh.
But when one moved forward, if there, something going down, when one moved forward, everybody moves
forward, yeah.
So in alignment, right?
Yeah.
So alignment with your brothers is not a bad thing, right?
Even if it's a misalignment, there's always still an alignment there.
Right. And they're real specific about a number of people, but real specific about my brother we have on now. They also talked about me having Justin Hurst on. Mm-hmm. And one of them even questioned my relationship with Tracy Whitfield, having her on. Can you imagine that?
I actually can imagine that. There are a lot of Uncle Toms and Thomases or whatever you want to call them.
I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, man. Uncle Tom, he made sure that when folks left the plantation, they had food, they had clothing. If he knew how to write, they had passes. Uncle Tom was a bad dude. He was more courageous in the field hand. So I can't dishonor his name. That carries his name. Go ahead. Coons?
Coons.
Coons.
Yes, coons.
Okay, I just want to make
There's
sure. But I don't know if we're
yeah.
allowed to say coons, FCC. Now,
What about conspirators?
now that white folks have figured out what coon means, it's a slur, and we really can't say that anymore.
Okay. Conspirators?
But I don't even know if they're wise enough to know that they're
Collaborators.
I don't know if they know they're collaborators. Anyways, they come with receipts and they sold out. But here we go. So with that being said, I had to do the long introduction. I'm sorry, Charles. I had to get that off my
No, go ahead, brother. No.
just to say, for all the folks out there, if you're watching, and people tend to go back and they'll watch it during the week, I'm going to say this once. The newspaper, the digital broadcast, this show that I've been on for 24 years on WTCC, audiences that I have, the platforms that I built. Here's the deal. You can't control what you don't own. If you don't invest, then you have no ownership whatsoever in the platforms that I create. So who I allow to come on, who I do articles on, who I talk about, only my mama and daddy should be concerned, right?
Yeah, and in addition to what you're saying too, is I heard my name was coming out some people's mouths, and I don't know if I particularly said that individual's name on a broadcast.
No,
but
you didn't.
But
you threw a rock into a crowd of coyotes, or not even, what's them little hyenas?
Hyenas.
One of them got hit.
Yeah, and hyenas. What is it? What did Andrew Gillum said with DeSantis? A hit dog will holler.
No, my mother said, if you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the only dog that's going to yelp is the dog that got hit.
Well, somebody got hit. I guess a couple of them got hit. Yeah. So I just had to get that off my chest. I'm hoping that I can use my platform to talk about, my issue.
The only challenge I got is you can't talk if you're not putting in the work, and you can't use terminology when you only describing 2 or 3 people. You can't say the community has told me, the community has spoken, when you're not in the community. You haven't done anything in the community. Does that make sense?
Whether they come with a box of receipts or not, the bottom line is you can't tell another man, a grown man, what he can and can't do. That's my concern. The rest of it, we'll get to them. We'll call them out as they don't do things. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce my brother from another mother. My man, Minister Charles Stokes, I'm going to allow you open access to the platform, man. Speak your piece, good brother.
First of all, as always, before I begin, I give thanks and honor and praise to the higher power whom I choose to call God and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And every day that I wake up alive, I just give him thanks and praise that I'm not where I used to be. And I just want to come on and articulate some of the concerns, like we have in our community, in our city, and don't mean to be, I mean to be truthful in everything that I say. And so they were going to publish an article on me anyway. And so I met with the reporter and she did the article and it came out in Sunday's newspaper. Just a little bit about my life and some of the things that took place in my life while I was here in the city of Springfield. And it came to highlight during Orlando Taylor III and his murder by the Springfield Police Department, which I never took back, which I never detracted. I always said that whatever the grandmother's story was, that's what I believe. She said her grandson was murdered, and I stick to that because that's what she said, and she was the only one there that witnessed it. I also believe the tape was altered based upon the fact that 3 other entities had it in their hands, contacted me to see would the grandmother want to see the film. And so that did take place. And so just to dispel some rumors, people suggesting that I went to the grandmother's house on the day of the murder to somehow enhance my profile in the city and the community was a lie. On the day that Orlando Taylor III was murdered, Earlene, the grandmother's cousin, called me. And that's how I got involved with that. It wasn't to highlight me in the community and the city to enhance my profile. I didn't go ambulance chasing. And I just wanted to clear that up. Also, I wanted to clear up the fact that, I do what I do based upon me knowing the history here of the city of Springfield. Um, just recently, I saw the photo for the first time of me laying in the streets in 1987 on Girard Ave and Burgess Circle, and blood was all over my body, all over the place. And a Springfield police officer that's now retired by the name of Muse said he could look at my face and see that I was getting ashen color. And it had not been for a police officer by the name of Lenny Scammons, a cop he said saved my life. But I always knew that there was an officer over me saying to me, now you're going to die. Now you're going to know what Victoria Seymour went through. A friend of mine who was murdered a year earlier, as some people were trying to rob me and shoot me for some drugs. And this officer watched me bleed on the concrete, and Muse did nothing. The other officer pulled up. I seen when he pulled up, got out the car, and he did place his finger and tourniquet my leg, and it stopped me from bleeding. And I lost, when I got to the hospital, I'm blessed to be alive. I had lost all the blood, half the blood in my body. The units of blood in my body had flowed on the streets of Girard Ave. And so that was kind of traumatic. And I say all of that to say that the reason why I advocate the way that I do and I am the way that I am, because during that time, 35 years ago in 1987, there were people in positions who said that they were getting funding to come into places like Burgess Circle and other places to talk to us, to get us into the different programs they had to get us off the streets. That never happened. I didn't find out about MCDI until I went to York Street. And so here I am 35 years later, and the same types of issues are going on. So right now, the buzzwords are mental health because of the Land Hotel III murder. And now you have people in the community, and Brother Darrell, you can bear witness to this, and also Brother Gary. I have been talking about mental health for the last 5 years in the city, when hardly no one else was talking about this issue. And now with the Orlando Hotel III murder, now all of a sudden, Gary, and Brother Keith, everybody now is doing mental health. That's the buzzword now. So you have the gatekeepers, you have the poverty pimps, you have people in the community who have not been talking about mental health, have not even been worrying about mental health. Now all of a sudden, everybody wants to do Black mental health because they think that some dollars are coming into the community. And my position is that since we have the only African-American mental health facility in Western Mass, in Springfield, how do we have mental health conversations and ADMA is not involved? How do we have these conversations with the so-called Black elected officials, social service agent giant, and they're not on the ground with us to talk about these important issues in the community? And so my assignment and my job is to make sure what happened to me and others, as Brother Keith can bear witness to, because Keith and I grew up together on Dave Street. Our lives took different paths, but we're together now. We've been knowing each other since we were little boys.
Right.
And some of us didn't make it out, Some of us fell victim to white supremacy and systematic racism. And so today, I just think it's necessary, since I know the history, I know the people, I know what they're up to, is to make sure that services that are coming into our community are going to the right people, so that the least of us who are suffering can get some help.
Okay. Okay.
And that's it, basically.
All right. Appreciate you sharing those words. And you're right. Now that I heard that there's a couple more panel discussions happening. Yeah, so you're right, Brother Stokes. People are doing it now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now we're doing it. Well, all right. Well, thank you, Minister Stokes, for if you're what it took for people to realize that people have challenges that need to be met, then more power to you. You know what I'm saying? Real talk. At least they're listening. The question, I agree with you in terms of the allocation of funds, making sure that it comes back where it needs to go. Brother Keith, anything you want to comment on?
Yes. As Minister Stokes has said, Charles has said, my man Heavy has said, as I've known him since we were kids.
Yes, sir.
It's a lot. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you a story. I was a young teenage boy, hanging out around Virgin Circle. We'd always see white man coming in 3 different cars: Cadillac, BMW, and if I'm not mistaken, one was a Ferrari. Middle of the night, while we're out there, summertime, and obviously we all knew what was going on. He was either picking up money or dropping off product. Did not live in the neighborhood. If I'm correct, lived in Long Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
But bringing this stuff, these products, this issue into our neighborhood. And I was a teenager. I seen it. This is not nothing I heard. This is not rumors. This is what I seen in that neighborhood. And so when you talk about how our neighborhoods have been ravaged for years, 30, 35 years, 40 years, with the same issue, we've asked for help. And all we've gotten, like say the 80s, crack ravaged the streets of Springfield like no tomorrow. We asked, we begged, we pleaded, and the only thing we got was locked up and the key thrown away. Turn around 30, 35 years later, there's an opioid and there's a pill addiction coming out of the suburbs. All of a sudden, the narrative changes and prison is no longer the answer. But what the answer is we need programs and, we need help. Now it's become a nationwide epidemic that every governor must answer to. And so, but when it's just us, it's no help, nowhere to be found and nowhere to be seen. So I do agree, with Brother Stokes. I believe, as the saying goes, high tide raises all boats. Mm-hmm. I think it takes all of us from different walks, different perspectives, different understandings, to understand exactly what's going on in our neighborhoods. Like I said, Charles and I have been friends our entire lives. Mm-hmm. And we've been friends, regardless of paths, regardless of which way life has gone. I have never been one to turn my back on a friend. We may not always walk in the same circles, but when we see each other, I don't shy away from stuff.
That's right.
We grew up, we understand. And and that's the whole mentality of everything, and so having to understand the psychological aspects of things that have gone on, and how things are twisted and turned, and how we are even pitted against one another, you know, and in our own community. Who wants to take? It's always been a mentality of who wants to. I'll help if I get the credit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so is it about really helping those who really need help, or is it about I want the credit for helping those who need help? And you know, and so that's always been an issue.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Gary. He likes to sit in the cut. I got to hear him speak. Any thoughts, man?
Yeah, I've got plenty of thoughts. So firstly, let's define mental health. Right? So, and we tried to define this the other day. So, mental health includes our social, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood through adolescence through adulthood. So I just wanted to put that on the table. And then, I wanted to talk about, because, a lot of us, the word trenches was mentioned the other day. And a lot of us have been in the trenches for a very long time. And so I came to this country, I believe in, I want to say 1978, which is a very long time. And it didn't take me long to figure out that the state of play as it relates to us Africans was in a very poor political and mental health situation. And I just want, there, at the time, Brother Dodds mentioned crack. For those of us that remember, there was an organization called CRACK. CRACK stood for Community Resources Against Community Killers. I don't know if you guys remember that. I had an organization about the age of 21 called UTPL, which stood for United to Push Life. And when you want to talk about trenches, we were in the trenches, marching around all the homes that were selling crack and other substances, telling them that they need to go. That's work in the trenches, right? Now, the first time I was introduced to crack was a phone call from some politicians in our city that said, we need to talk to you. And I went and I met with them, and they asked me to disband my organization, UTPL. And this is what they said. There is some money coming down the pipe. And when it comes down the pipe, we will take care of you. Now, I tell that story, that narrative, that truth, because politics in Springfield for people of color has not changed. And it needs to change. If people are doing this work for money, they're in the wrong business, because Black lives, Black families, men, women, and children, their lives are really at stake. So I wanted to throw that out there. This is real. And the reason why I wanted to come on tonight was that, Charles has been doing this work. Don't get me wrong, I do the work. My partner David Lewis does the work, and all the therapists that work with us and for us, they do the work. But from a political standpoint, Charles is doing the work. Charles has been pivotal in the discussion that is occurring in Springfield amongst Black politicians. So I think we should commend Charles. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is a couple of mathematical equations. The first thing is, there is a mathematical equation to the Black family, and that is FM equals C squared by S by E. F is the father, M is the mother, and then equals C squared. The C is the child, and squared is multiple children, and the S is the school, and the E is the environment. And if any one of those is off kilter, the Black family is in a poor situation. So we need to understand that equation, and we need to make sure that when one of those variables are not operating, we need to fix it. We need to fix it quick. The other variable, or the other equation I want to talk about, mathematical equation, is our ego. Now, the mathematical equation for ego is 1 over knowledge. I want to make sure you guys get that. 1 over knowledge. That means when we or an individual thinks we have all the knowledge, we fail to listen to the other brother or sister that has some knowledge also. And that is one of the biggest problems that I see occurring in Springfield. And I'm just going to land on this now. Dr. Amos, because we come from a perspective of post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Amos said there are 5 things that we should pay attention to if you want to see whether or not we are still suffering from slavery, which I call PTSS today. He said, what name do you answer to? What God do you answer to? Who do you call your God?
Mm.
And I know that one right there is controversial, right? So, but it needs to be said. What language do you speak? Do we speak? What food do we eat? And what uniforms do we wear? Those are 3 critical things. So if you just look at all of us, me included, not one of us have a piece of African clothing on. That tells us that we're in a poor place. And our names, as you know, none of us, unfortunately, have our African names, except, and I can go on and on and on. So I'm just going to land on that, and I hope to bring something else into the conversation. But our mental health is in a bad place, and I'm hoping that our politicians begin to do some of the work that Brother Charles Stokes has been doing. And I'll land on that.
Well, before you land on that, I gotta ask. Sometimes we have these unrealistic expectations of our politicians because we elected them. Now, in order for them to be effective and for them to understand some of the things you're saying, some of the things that Charles had been screaming from, the back streets of Springfield, don't we have to deprogram them? Don't we have to actually basically find a way to replace them with folks who have already been thoroughly deprogrammed? And if we really want to accomplish this stuff, you talked about ego. Somebody talked about ego. And typically, the person who runs to the front of the class and said they want to be a leader, the person who runs to the front of the group and said they want to be elected to lead, typically are people who run because they feel they're entitled and they deserve that leadership role. Doesn't mean that they're leaders. The person we want to lead typically is the person that the community or the group is saying, nah, Brother Charles, I know you want to lead, but we all choose him because he's been putting in the work. He sees the world from a different lens, the type of lens that we all want to identify with. So how do we throw out those expectations of elected officials, black, white, or other, knowing that they're not even, forget about, when you talk about decolonializing your mind and developing an African mentality, some of these folks are like Herschel Walker in it all the way to City Hall. So how do we maintain those types of expectations without disappointing us or setting ourselves up to fail?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, brother. And so I'm a strong believer that the onus is on each and every one of us as individuals. And so as we begin to coalesce, right? So if there is a group of us that have the same belief system, and we are out there talking to our brothers and sisters, and you know I like to use the language affricate, and we are affricating them into really what is going on and being honest and calling names. This idea, you know, it's funny. I find it really funny when I speak to lots of brothers and sisters in the city of Springfield, and they refuse to call the brother or the sister's name that's doing wrong. That is part of our sickness, right? We need to just call the brothers out and the sisters out. By the way, Tracy Whitfield is another sister that's been doing some very good work in the city of Springfield. Let me tell you why I love Tracy. She's not the typical politician. She's not the politician that people that believes that she should just stay in a lane. She understands that every African problem is her problem. So, you know, shout out to Tracy Whitfield. Well, but, you know, and if I haven't mentioned you, it's because I don't believe that you're doing the work like she does. So, and I just want to be very clear. All right. So I think it's our role now to be honest, to be honest in love, right? And to be able to have a conversation. But at the same time, it's time for some of these politicians to sit down. To sit down. You know, you've done enough damage in the African community.
Okay.
What is your role as a black politician? If it's the same role as the white politician, then brother, you're doing, or sister, you're doing us no good. You have to have a different role.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I hear you. We have to start saying names. I tell everybody, keep no secrets. I have this thing about dragging other black people, regardless of how coonish they may be, publicly. Because my thing is, white folks, you know, Irish, Italian, Latino, all of them, everybody watches us. And as long as I'm dragging Gary, Gary's dragging me, because we're both accusing each other of not doing due diligence, everybody else is watching, knowing that we're fighting, and it makes it easier for them to come in and manipulate us. Example, what's his name? Oh, they told me I say his name too much. You want to say his name for him? The mayor guy. What's his name?
Dominic Sano
put out a release saying that Justin and Tracy, you know, are going after Cephas Jackson. Everybody, you know what I mean? Everybody believed it. Hook, line, and sinker. Without even asking Tracy, without asking Justin. To the point.
Cephas.
Or Cephas. So, but I mean, for the most part, it was Justin and Tracy that was accused by this white dude. And everywhere I go, people are like trashing them, talking about, you know, they going after Cephas, and that's just wrong. And I'm like, because this one person said it. So the thing is, they know we're fractured. And the only I say call them out, but call people. I think we have to call people into the living room, and we have to bring them home, and we have to hold them accountable. I think doing it over the airwaves or doing it like Rick Hurst has been doing it with the newspaper, I don't think that's the most practical way of going about it. So talk to me. I mean, tell me why we should do anything other.
Well,
hold on. Let him finish, Brother Stokes, and I'll get right to you.
Yeah, let me just, and I appreciate your position, Daryl, but if there is 169,000 people in Springfield, I just throwing that number out, I don't know if it's correct, and let's just say 33% of us are people of color, and a handful of us are our elected black officials, and they're doing damage, then at some point, having the living room conversation is no longer what's needed. I do agree that we need to have that type of conversation, but at some point we got to bring this message to the masses, because these masses are being led by a handful of people. And if they're doing damage and we know that they're doing damage, then my position is we are just as culpable.
Okay, fair. Go ahead, Brother Stokes.
So this is why I've been saying, to know the history here in the city of Springfield, when you know the history, then you're best qualified to reward all research. What do I mean? The people in Springfield that knows the elected politician, when we're having private conversations, they're saying, oh man, they've been doing that for years. Or we know who've been doing that for years, right? So 1998, I get out of prison after doing an 18 to 20 year sentence. Myself and Reverend David Lewis was trying to get the police to do Harambe. We brought the Harambe back. We sat down with some of the elders of the community. And while we're sitting in the house, 25 years ago, as we're sitting in the house, we were told to change the format of the Harambe and let the first generation of people who started the Harambe be recognized. Reverend Lewis says, no, we got a format. We'll do that, but we already got a format. We were told then that if we don't do what we're told, we can get the F out of the house. They don't got to do nothing we ask. If we want what they have, we have to take it. Reverend David Lewis, I looked at him, he looked at me. I thought they meant now. I just got out doing 18 to 20. So I'm like, well, let's take it now. And Dave was like, no, let's go. We just leave. We didn't get the police, but that's what we were told. So here we are 25 years later, 2022. Reverend David Lewis Sr. and Adma and Gary Porter is doing stuff. For whatever reason, the spirit whom I call God has put me in this position. And now what you have going on here in the city of Springfield are people who are like, oh my God, what we never wanted to happen is happening. People from Bergen Circle, people from Robertson Garden, people from Rifle Street are now the adults. And now they're shaking stuff and they're making noise. And what they know is that we know everybody who's not doing what they're supposed to do. So for years, what has happened here, D, is because Keith's mother and father went to school with some of these people. Some of those people kept my mother on Section 8 when me and my brother was acting crazy. They used those relationships to say, Miss Jackson, can you talk to Heavy and make Heavy stop talking about this person? My mother calls me. Can you stop doing that? They're the people that kept me on Section 8 when you and your brothers was acting crazy. We mentioned his name, Cephas Jackson. When we moved here from Paterson, New Jersey in the late 60s, it was Cephas Jackson who helped my mother get her first apartment, right?
You shared that on the air before.
So these relationships they use, right? Mm-hmm. We don't say nothing, and the people who are doing wrong keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, right? Because of the relationships. And because of those relationships, it's like somebody's getting raped in the house. And we don't want to tell what's going on in the house because that's our dirty laundry. But the person keeps getting raped and is not getting no help. So our community is keep getting raped. Now, Daryl, they got a new generation of rapists that's coming up, following in the footsteps of those people who are training them. So now, my daughter, Gary's daughter, your daughter, when we die and gone, that same cycle will continue. So now when we call them out by name, now they're like, oh my God, they don't know what to do. And I'm saying, We don't do this to slander somebody. I've been called a lot of things. But when I say one thing, they've never called me is a liar. And so, because we know the history of not a handful of people ran Springfield, one person ran Springfield, Black politicians, and he had disciples. Now, those of us who was in Burgess Circle, me and Ronnie Moore and Goody and all of us who was sniffing dope and smoking crack, nobody came to us to help us. Now here I come, and I see the same thing that happened to me when I was shot on Gerard Ave bleeding. It's the same thing now that's happening. And my point and my position is, okay,
But
I can no longer allow you guys to continue to do the same thing.
I hear
That's
everything.
my whole pushback.
I hear everything you're saying, brother. And I know when I came here, I don't know the entire history of Springfield. I ain't from Bergen Circle. I'm not from Springfield. I'm proud of where I came from. We put in work. We dealt with the same challenges. Some of the things that we're dealing with are not Springfield issues. These are universal issues across the Black community, across the country. And I think if we're going to build, we're going to build. When I first started doing the Indie Soul Fest, they told me I couldn't do what I want to do. And some people think because I was working downtown that it was totally sponsored and I was given permission by the dude in room 214 who had no idea I was working on a festival. They said we want to start the Association of Black Business and Professionals. We're going to what, year 7 when we started that?
Yeah.
Didn't ask for permission. And the whole time we're building, there were people who wanted to go public and dog me and didn't know me. So I'm really careful about going public and dogging other Black people without doing due diligence. That's me. It's different if I know their history, but even if I think I know their history and I don't really know them, then I really can't say what people are doing, what they're not doing. And I think one of the things we got to break out of, and I think, Brother Gary, I'm always quoting you, as we decolonize our minds, we have to get rid of a lot of these coons, get these coons out of our head too. The bottom line is there's nothing preventing us from building. Working with Brother Gary and all these cats would add them up. We're doing, I mean, it's like I look at just that one panel discussion is going to lead to about 10 more. And we keep doing it. And the question is, I don't need to be invited to anybody else's table. I don't need to kiss anybody else's ring to do that. I think we have the intellectual capacity. We have access to resources. We could fund our own stuff. Been funding things that I've been doing, the Young Scholars Academy, you name it. It ain't about me. I'm just saying, just use myself as an example. No, I'm not caught up in that Springfield thing, not a part of anybody's circle, nobody's clique, never followed anybody. You wake up, you think there's something, you can do something good for the Black community, you make the call, you get it done. So that's the school of thought I'm from. So in the meantime, my thing is in terms of how do we get rid of those people, I think we have to utilize our resources. We need media mechanisms. We need everybody to be on the same page. We have to control. I think for me, it's all about controlling that narrative. Everything y'all brothers are saying correct, but we got to start boosting up the folks who are actually doing the work, not people who are complaining, because there's a lot of people who complain and they point fingers. And at the end of the day, they're not doing any work. They're bitching and moaning and complaining about everybody. But then when you say, well, brother, sister, what exactly have you done? Show me your body of work. There's no body of work.
Nothing.
Just because, you can complain about somebody, and being pro-Black doesn't mean always attacking Black people. I think that's another problem we have, which is why I'm glad I got these two brothers on, because we think that being pro-Black means, and Brother Charles, I ain't talking about you, I'm saying and talking in general. Make sure it's clear for everybody. We think that being pro-Black means that we have to go after Black people who we feel aren't doing anything. I think being pro-Black, I think the ultimate goal is getting to the point where Brother Gary's talking. Well, we have to start identifying as Africans. It means that communal approach. If my brother is down, I need to help lift him up. If he's lost, I need to help redirect him, help him find a way. If he keeps selling us out to the opposition, eventually he needs to be dealt with. Stokes, I think you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be dealt with in a different type of way. But I just think that being pro-Black means that you understand what your brother or sister is going through. Everybody's not on the same page, the same place, in the same space. I think that comes with that. We all evolve differently. We all see the world differently. Some of us are, further behind than others. But just because I'm in a space where I'm comfortable in my skin, I'm comfortable with the work that I do, doesn't mean that I can look at somebody who doesn't know anything except for what he's been taught to believe, and he's not doing the right thing, but we put him in a position because we voted for him because of the color of his skin. I can't dog that brother until I at least take the opportunity to try and work with him. I'm going to say with Justin, love that dude. Never worked with him. He never cared for me. I never cared for him. But it's like there's a bigger picture. Anything I can do to help that brother now, I'm going to help, because now I'm in a position where I can actually stop and honestly assess him, no political distortion. And I can look and say, yo, this cat's on the right path, whether people like what I say or not. Is what it is. I can say that out loud. Heavy, there was a time when you would look at me with this thing.
Yep.
We got a chance to know each other. We can work together. Brother Gary, we didn't even know each other. I don't think we had ever had a conversation. Didn't even give each other a chance to even say, I don't like you for the right reason. Didn't know each other. So I think as Africans, I think that's the point. I think we have to take the time to really spend time with each other. We don't do that. What we do is we make accusations, we point fingers, and I'm not talking about y'all. I just think since we got y'all two mental health brothers on, I'm trying to understand why we do that. I mean, we have conversations about it, but somebody help me understand why we do that, because it took me years to stop doing that myself.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have historically been pitted against one another. And it's like we've treated it like there's only one position. And so only one of us can have it, and only one of us can maintain it, without taking into account that we have a community that can work together. But we've been taught that. We've been taught to criticize and to down and to climb across one another in order to get to wherever it is we feel we need to be. And our community has suffered time and time again with that same type of mentality. And, I was asked a question on an interview maybe 2 months ago. And it was about our national country and the way things are going. And they asked me, how does things going to change? And I said, nothing's going to change till some of them brothers die out, period. Because the ones who are running things, they come from a different mentality, a different era. And a lot of times it doesn't agree with some of our younger folks and how they want to do stuff. But our younger people aren't in a position, they aren't in power. They aren't making the decisions. You have, 75, 80, 85-year-old men who come from a segregationist era making decisions where a lot of other people don't agree with those decisions, but they're in the power and they're going to continue to do what they do. And quite frankly, don't give a damn how we feel about it. And so it's not going to change, and nothing's going to change until them brothers die. Period. And I was told that was pretty harsh. And I said, well, give me another example, because they're not retiring. They're not giving up power. They'll die in them seats, but they're not going to give it up. And so nothing's going to change. And here in Springfield, what we need to do is, I'm not really concerned about those who may be in power today. What we need to do is start lifting up them folks that we know are going to forget about them. We don't even need to talk about them. Right. And start promoting and lifting up and putting in place, regardless of what other people may think about it, right, those that we know are going to do what's right. Tracy and I have been friends a long time. She's feisty, always has been. She's a fighter, always has been, and don't care what you think about her. And so, and not from a political standpoint. She's not trying to build political points. She's trying to help a community. Yes. Anytime you try to help a community, folks not going to like you. And with my friend Charles he doesn't make people comfortable. And we always need people that's going to make other people uncomfortable with how they feel and with what they're doing. And because folks don't like to be uncomfortable. And too many people have been too comfortable in the situations that they've been in, and our people have suffered because of it. So forget about what they're doing. We have enough, like you said, we have enough equity, we have enough power, we have enough understanding, we have enough education, we have enough of everything to start lifting up folks that aren't screaming, I want to be a leader, but need to be the leaders.
Woo! Plus the offering plate.
So, excuse me. This water is toxic. Thank you, Brother Keith. I got a question. Gary, I'm going to go to you real quick. Decolonizing our minds. See, it's like I'm listening to what you guys are saying, but having grown up, I didn't grow up in Springfield. And when we left Waterbury, you know, my formidable years, we were in an all-white environment. And I think that's the thing Rob and I have in common. And they say if you've never lived in a predominantly all-white environment, if you've never experienced you and maybe 2 or 3 other classmates being the only black kids in the entire school, and at some point, the only blacks in the school system, you see the world completely different. And I think that's one of the reasons why I take the stance I have when it comes down to working with black people. So I got to ask this question, since this is something that you talk a lot about. Decolonizing our minds. Why is it so damn hard? You know, as we look at what the things we're talking about, if we look at it from a political perspective, spiritual, financial, intellectual, why is it so damn difficult to get them out of our heads? It's to the point where sometimes how we look at white supremacy impacts how we even see each other and how we treat each other. Why is it so hard to decolonize and just evict them?
Yeah, so brother, one of the reasons why it's a mammoth task, right? It's because just about every piece of information we have in our head is European. You know, the way for me to best describe it is that a computer is going to do what is designed or programmed to do, right? Yep. So when we have that level of programming in our head, which comes from the deconstruction of the black family, again, if we go back to those 5 points, right? Who do we call God? What names do we answer to? What's our language? What food do we eat? And what uniforms do we wear? Every facet of the African mind was deconstructed. Every facet, to the point that we are disrespecters of each other. That is just where we're at today. And so it's hard for us to decolonize our minds if new information is not going in, right? And so I've spent the last 30 years or so putting in Afrocentric information. And so they say in computer language, garbage in, garbage out, right? What you put in is what you get out. And so if we spend the time to put the correct information in, then we're going to get the correct behavior coming out of us. And so this is just true in every system that we can think of. And that's why it's hard, brother. And our school systems is one of the biggest problems, right? Because self-esteem, when we talk about, and I said this the other day, Africans, our children, do not get self-esteem in a Eurocentric school system. So if we're in a school system and we are not getting self-esteem, then you have to understand when we leave that school system, we're useless to each other, right? We don't believe we can do anything. So all we can do is be honest, and we need to advocate, you know, our sisters, our politicians in the school system, and our politicians in the city council. We need to really advocate for a overhaul of the educational system where it comes to people of color. And if we can't do that, then we need some supplementary schools. You know, when we brought in our friend Dr. Umar Johnson, who you was a big part of that, Darrell,
Yep.
right? The reason why what he's doing is mission critical is because we know that 12 years of Afrocation will create a new African, which
Absolutely.
will create new behavior. So that's why it's so hard, right? This is really why it's so hard. And then don't talk about God. Don't even bring the name God up, because that is going to tear the Black community up or the African community up immediately. The very tool that was used to colonize us. So we've got a lot of work to do, brother. And I know that was a long way of answering your answer.
No. That was a perfect way.
That is the only way I can get there.
Gary, can you for the people who are listening, can you talk about old wives' tales, right? Oh, if you're not feeling good, throw some Vicks on your chest, or if you got a burn, put some butter on it, which was handed down from generation to generation to generation. We know that butter's not good for burns, but can you let people know, based on what you were saying in terms of the programming, how these laws impacted Black folks in this country and how it, from generation to generation to generation, it keeps getting pushed forward? I came across a law, in particular, in 1680, Virginia, and a lot of these states had these laws, by the way. 1680, Virginia's General Assembly restricted the ability of slaves to meet at gatherings, including funerals.
Take out slaves. Substitute slaves were Africans.
Okay, well, Darrell just did it. So when you talk about, we don't work together, Black people don't work together, and you kind of look at this one law, can you kind of like tell the people who are listening like how a law back in the mid 1600s could impact us today in terms of the programming?
Yeah, sure. And kudos to Brother Darrell, who asked you to make that substitution, right? Because we shouldn't be using the word slave. We should be using the word enslaved, right? Or Africans. And that's just a very small part of being Africated. But that particular law that you just mentioned, brother, I really don't know much about. But I can talk to it, because those laws were promulgated not just all over the USA, but all over the world, where we as Africans were not allowed to congregate. We had one role, and that was to provide free labor and the creation of more enslaved people. That was our sole role. We were not to be a family. We were not to be a mother or father. We were shadow and we were property. So that type of thinking, that type of mentality has killed us, and it's what we have carried on intergenerationally. That's why we talk about PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome. But let me introduce you to Drapetomania. Drapetomania is a law that came out at a similar point in time, I think a little bit earlier, by a psychologist by the name of Samuel Cartwright, I believe his name was. And for those of us that are clinicians, like Brother Dodds, we use the DSM-5, right? Mm-hmm. That is where we get our menu diagnoses, right? And so there was a diagnosis called drapetomania. And so psychologists said that if a slave didn't want to be a slave or attempted to run away, he had mental illness. That is the sickness of their laws, right? And then we may remember, I remember once Brother Stokes talked about notorious manumission. That is where we were literally rewarded, right, for snitching on another African. Now that law is in action today amongst our politicians, right? Yep. And if you're trying to build a business in the city of Springfield, they are going to run and let somebody know and sound the alarm that these people of color over here are trying to do this. So that's a law and an idea and a belief system that is still prevalent today in right here in the city of Springfield.
I can also want to speak a little bit about when you talk about how we don't congregate together. One of the things that happened when we came over from Africa is that in order to help us not communicate with one another, then everybody who came from the same tribe was separated. And so you were forced to learn how to speak broken English because you could. And the thing has always been because they was always afraid of us conspiring against them. And what is not talked about a lot as far as us being in slavery is our rebelliousness that always has permeated throughout slavery, throughout that time.
Are you talking critical race theory?
Excuse me?
That's not allowed. FCC regulations.
Oh well, we gonna get into that because these are the things that it's always been that way. So when you separate people and cause them not to be able to communicate with one another, then you can't conspire against them. And so, and like you say, not allowing us to be families. How you have deconstructed us from the very beginning, like we were put together for mating purposes, not for marriage purposes. And so, like, here's the thing. A big, like, let's take Rob. Now, Rob,
I knew it was coming, man.
Oh, it's coming.
I knew it was coming.
Rob would he the one that's gonna procreate because you're gonna get a nice big strapping woman, and they gonna make babies. Now D.Moss and the younger me, we gonna stand outside the shack. Because they don't want us spreading out. They want your seed, not ours, so that you can make big, strong, strapping more people, and so But then they come and then they take our babies, and they sell our babies, and from a mental standpoint, in order for you to survive that type of environment, that means in a lot of ways we had to disconnect ourselves from one another. And disconnect ourselves from our children.
Absolutely.
Because there's nobody that can survive as they continue to snatch babies out of your arms and selling them to the highest bidder. And stripping apart the family. And then having the brother come down from the big house and you go outside while I rape your woman. And and all of these things that are taking place. And now they're trying to flip it on us and talk about us as men as being, absentee fathers. The originators of absentee fathers is the white man. And they never acknowledged us light, you light-skinned brothers, Brother Rob, and things of that nature, that you belong to them. Never acknowledged you, never gave any of us, and we all have it in our DNA. And so all of these things, when you talk about the mental health of the black man, all of these things that was done to us, and then you think about the fact of how even black men and black women have been pitted against one another. The black woman's upset because the black man couldn't protect her. The black man's upset because the white man wanted to kill him if he ever looked at him wrong. And, so they've tried to, castrate us from the very beginning, and so the Bible has a thing. It talks about how if you want to pillage any town, any village, the very first thing they go after is the man. And it talks about binding up the strong man. So if you in every war, they always go into the town and village and they kill the men. Then they can rape and pillage and do whatever they want. And so when you bind us up, it causes us not to be able to do anything. And so from the very beginning, we've always been, that's that whole thing in the South where you couldn't look a white man in the eye. You always had to look down. You always had to yes sir, no sir, and all these things, because it was all about emasculating us. Mm-hmm. It's all about taking away our power. And so every generation, that's always been the thing.
So it becomes a transitional value.
Mm-hmm. From generation. And so when you add in the fact, when you talk about the mental health, or as Brother Gary talks about, post-traumatic slave syndrome, all of these things has been done to us, and it was done systematically. It wasn't haphazard. And so, and it has taken its toll on us as a community. It's taken its toll on us as men. It's taken its toll in every aspect of our lives. It's taken its toll. And we have been told over and over again how we are less than other people. And I'll give you an example. I've always been an honor student from day one to until now. I am like, even now, I'm in a doctoral program. I carry a 4.0. I've carried a 4.0 through my master's, all the way through my doctorate. I have a 4.0. When I was in school, and I think I was in like the 5th or the 6th grade, they pulled me out of regular class, put me in a class, and said they put me in this class because I did not do well and I could not understand the material that was being taught. Now, I knew that was wrong, and I screamed and I hollered and I talked, and they never would move me out of that class until I went to my father. And I told my father what was happening and what was going on. Now, a lot of the other people that was in that class, they were happy to be there because they didn't have to do no work. I didn't want to be there because I knew I didn't belong there. My father came to the school and talked to the principal, talked to the vice principal, talked to the counselors, and it was like, well, this is where he belonged. My father made them, they said, well, we'll give him a test. My father said, no, you're going to give him a test right now in the principal's office. They gave me a test. I got a 97 on that test, and my father made them put me back in a regular classroom. But I wouldn't settle for that. But that's what they now they told me to my face, you can't understand the work. No, I've never failed a test in my life. But that's what they were trying to put into my mind, that I just wasn't good enough.
Brother,
go ahead, Brother Gary.
Yeah, I just want to ask Brother Keith a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brother Keith, and I'm really glad to hear you come from that position. So, knowing this as a therapist, right? How do you think this should inform how you do therapy with families of color? Because there lies the problem, that we have African therapists doing therapy like our white counterparts. Okay. So we're unable to really assist.
Good question.
Our people.
Okay.
Good question.
Now, for me, I'll give an example. I have a client whose father was shot and killed, and he had a white therapist who said, well, if you don't commit crimes, you won't have any issues with the police. Couldn't help him in any way, shape, form. I understand the issues. I've come from the neighborhood. I understand that our neighborhoods have been over-policed and underserved. And I come from a standpoint of always understanding that, from that standpoint of what our people need from that point of view, as a black man and a black father, and as a that grew up in this system under this rule, and so I encourage them to be able to understand that whatever it is that you want to do, it is possible for you to do that, in spite of the inequities that have come and continue to permeate our communities and our lives. And like I say, I can understand a lot of things that our community has gone through because I've lived it and I've lived in it and I understand it. And so I don't come from a Eurocentric point of view. I come from a point of view of a man who grew up in the inner city and understand everything that goes on.
So
And
does that mean that you so I getting back to Gary's question, does that mean that your practice is different? Do you modify it to accommodate your Black clients?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
I think that's because I have another one. So we talk about folks who grew up in over policed areas. What about those of us who grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods? It wasn't over policed, but the cops kept their eye on us, and there were issues like education. There was issues about blatant discrimination. I mean, all these other issues. How do we modify it? Because sometimes we make the assumption that everybody grew up in the same type of neighborhood,
No,
and
I
everybody grew up
understand.
with the same type of social circumstances. Here's my question. My real question is this: as Black folks attempt to heal or self-heal, is it important for us to understand the oppressive nature of this white system that we grew up in? I mean, is that critical? How important is that?
Let me go ahead.
Okay, it's very important. And if you go back to looking at what you said something about CRT. Every system in this country, whether it's housing, education, jobs, whatever it is a systemic racism that runs through that system, and it's been proven that that's what it is. So everything that we deal with, like I say, going to school in a predominantly white neighborhood, being the only Black children, I'm quite sure there was some overt racism that you had to deal with as a young Black man. And even if there was an issue, I'm quite sure the first person they looked at as causing the problem was you. Now they could have called you every name but the one your mother gave you, but you're the one that created the problem. And so from that standpoint, now you have to deal with it from that standpoint, where trying to integrate yourself into an all-white society that does not want you, but you're there. And so that brings about its own sense of trauma, anger, frustration. There's nowhere for you to go. It's like the old systems. Like say, our people are lynched and it's the police that did it. So you can't go to the cop and say, look what they did to me. So there's nowhere for you to go to get the help that you need. And so there's a lot of healing that has to take place. And I'm quite sure in your own life, there was some hatred, suspicion of white folks on a DNA type of level for you. Am I right or wrong?
You're 100% correct.
Let me just say, Daryl, that question, it's not, listen, it's more than important, brother. It's mission critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't deal with that issue as a people, we will achieve nothing. Every diagnosis, every problem, and I mean every problem, I don't care if it's relational, husband and wife, couples, boyfriend and girlfriend, anxiety, depression, bipolar, anger, psychosis, schizophrenia, I can link it to racism as it relates to people of color. It is plain simple. The diagnosis may look like this, but it is rooted in systemic racism. And I will not allow anybody to tell me any difference, because it's been proven, and the outcomes of my work, because of the work that I do, we have Black families reconstructing, right? We have men that are no longer behaving in a polyamorous or polygamous manner, which was directly intergenerational behavior.
Yeah.
They've been able to curtail their anger, and the outcomes have been positive, 100% positive. So I know that is the only answer for us.
Okay.
What they deconstructed, we have to reconstruct, and they started this with racism, with systemic racism. So that has to be the answer.
Right. Because Rob talked about, the laws. There's laws on the books, but outside of the laws, just the trauma that folks experience on the plantation. I know there are people who say, slavery is over. We have to get over that. We have to move on. That has nothing to do with my interactions with my, significant other, has nothing to do with my family. But then I'm thinking, my father being the grandson of a slave, everything they took off that, we talk about those transitional values that went from one generation to another. When we talk about, the frustrations they had going, working, going into the military, you do a tour of duty and career, and you come back and you chased out the South. You move up north, you get a job, and you're treated like a nigga. Your manhood is suppressed all day at work. You come home, and who do you take it out on? Your family. So you have the kids. I'm looking at Stokes as he talks about his history. It's like, so kids are impacted. The kids don't know how to, I want to play with my dad. I want to talk to my mom, but they've dealt with that white supremacy all day long to the point where they go to talk to mom, pops, and nobody has time. They're so flustered. They're trying to decompress from everything they've dealt with in the course of the workday that child is about to blow up. So you go find your own means of healing or expression or trying to get that stuff off your chest. You can't talk to grandma because grandma says, go pray. And no matter which way you go, the family's being torn apart by all these external conditions. So it's kind of like, I'm with you, Brother Gary and Keith. It's like, how do you not go to see someone so that you can find a way to finally heal from all that? Whether you lived in an all-white neighborhood or an all-black neighborhood, family members are still dealing, as you get older, you deal with the same harsh, torrid trauma. And you come home and we wonder why folks drink and not even just drink, self-medicate. You got to heal some type when there's no outlet. We're finally in a situation when I feel blessed. I can call Brother Gary. I can get on the phone with Brother Keith. I can call quite a few others if I need to decompress. Everybody doesn't. And this is 2022. We're finally at a point where we can say we have black clinicians. I remember there was a time in Springfield, I think at one point, Brother Anthony Hill might have been the only therapist that I knew, period. So it's kind of like we're in a situation now where we have a number. I look at ADMA and the number of brothers and sisters they have working for them. We have my son, he's going to kill me, but he's comfortable with the brother that he's dealing with on a regular basis. So it's kind of like, for the people who say, and this isn't for y'all brothers, this is for the folks who are listening, for the people who say that, slavery has absolutely nothing to do with this. We need to deal with our own problems and man up. You can't let go of the past because that DNA follows you everywhere you go.
Yep.
You can have nightmares every night and have no idea. You're talking about night terrors and you have no idea that it stems from childhood trauma because family, your parents or your guardians were dealing with trauma. And it's just crazy. I'm not no therapist, but I just need y'all to help brothers and sisters to really understand why we need to go sit in that chair. You can't, I can tell you to go pray, but if I tell you to pray, I think Brother Gary had a point. You close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Picture Jesus and describe him. I guarantee we'll all draw the same person.
I got a black Jesus.
Now, this same dude at work looked just like him, and I'm closing my eyes. I'm praying to the dude who looked like the guy, the people at work who are just driving me to the point where I just want to drink, smoke, or kill somebody. Close my eyes to pray, and I see that same person with my eyes are closed. If you think that's not traumatic, that's crazy. Then someone says, sing the song, what can make you white as snow? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Well, Jesus is white, so I'd be white as snow to heal? Help me to deal with this. Somebody.
Yeah.
I can't be somebody's here tomorrow, man. I'm going through right now.
You sure are.
Brother, I've got to tell you, I ought to be wise enough not to say what I'm about to say, but
you're going to say it anyways, ain't you?
Well, you raised the issue.
Okay.
And And, so let me just tell the world that Brother Gary Porter is not a Christian. Let me just say that. And for those of you that know me, that are friends, people call me Geb, right? That's my African name. I understand my brothers that have held on to to God. I get it, but the history does not support that, and neither is the Bible. Neither does the Bible support it. I'm just throwing it out there, and it's not an African concept. We come from a concept of Ma'at, which is a whole different dialogue, a whole different program. It is not an African concept that we are practicing within our families, and that is part of the problem. And so I know that there's going to be a bunch of people that's going to come out and going to say, you don't want to go to talk to him. He doesn't even believe in Jesus. Right? Trust me, you want to come talk to me because I know what I'm talking about, and I connect you to who we are as Africans. And that's all I'm going to say there, because I don't wish to be disrespectful to certainly my dear brother Charles or brother Dodds or anybody else, but I just got to let you know I'm not a believer of that system.
Hey, Gary.
So I just want to say briefly that you cannot offend me. Really, you can't offend me. And people need to hear the truth. I just know that my grandfather and them raised us a little different. I come from a family that my grandfather was a bishop, but he was also a part of the Deacons of Defense in Toccoa, Georgia, growing up. And so it's really, that's why, if you notice, the police officer, he retired, his name was Ray Muse. He said that they hated me. He said, Heavy hated us and we hated him. And so my whole life has been spent understanding, not clearly, but I always was taught who my enemy was. And going to prison and then hearing the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad through Minister Farrakhan and Malcolm X, it really changed my whole life and turned me into who I am today. And so unfortunately, the greatest thing about me going to prison was it saved my life. And I got to get introduced to a whole bunch of different thought processes and everything. And what I often say, because I hear a lot of people saying about Muslims saying certain people got the white man's religion, Africans saying that the Muslims and the black Muslims and the black Christians got it wrong. The Moors say that the Africans got it wrong. Black people spend so much time denigrating each other's belief system. And I asked myself, and I asked everybody, if everybody that was black in the world said they was a Moor, if everybody black in the world says, I'm an African that believes in my art, if every black person in the world, whatever belief system you wanted to believe, if we all said we were that, would that stop white people from killing us and doing what they're doing today? Because if the answer is yes to that, then we need to find out what worshiping or religion or whatever we want to have to stop white people from killing us, because they don't care whether you're African, they don't care whether you're a Moor, they don't care whether you're a Christian, they don't care whether you're a Seventh-day Adventist. As Malcolm said, they persecute us because of the color of our skin. And so I think oftentimes that when we throw out these things like this is the problem and this is the problem and this is the problem, white people who are racist and want to kill us, they laugh at us because they're like, no, I don't care if you believe in my aunt. I don't care if you believe in flying eagles. Nigga, we killing you because you're a nigga.
But
Why do we think it's so?
But Charles, me trying to answer that question, we just pulled them right. We just gave them all like this by asking that question. We're basically giving them godlike status.
No. What I'm saying is,
and I think their answer to your question should be something to the effect of, doesn't matter what they try to do. In order for me to get back to me, I got to bring it back to the source. And I think that's why it was brought up. It's not about them. And we are, again, when we talk about decolonizing, let's take them out the conversation.
First, I got to finish what I was saying.
Okay.
We can't take them out of the conversation because they're the ones that's killing us. My question is, my purpose for asking this is, it doesn't seem like those who put the plunger up Diallo Amadubo's butt, the ones who kill Oscar Grant, the ones that's killing us, when they look at us to kill us, they don't care what our religious persuasion is. So the question I'm asking is, when Gary and others say, it's the Jesus you believe in, or you don't believe in my aunt, or it's because of this belief system you have with God is the main reason why we're in the condition that we're in. I'm asking, does our enemy that we're fighting against care about that?
Can we answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got an answer for the question.
I'm gonna go right to you, brother Gary. They're not my enemy, and I'm gonna tell you why. The most dangerous man in the world to me is the man I see when I look in the mirror every day. They're not powerful enough to get me. The second most dangerous person to me, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the brother who looks just like me who hasn't found himself yet. I grew up in an all-white town. We had Klan rallies, bro. The police will always be there. Racist bigots will always be there. I would walk home. We were the only black family on one side of town when we left Waterbury. I'd walk home by myself. I don't fear them. The only worst they can do to me is kill me. The worst thing I can do to myself is not do all this, from the point of birth to the point of death, not try and find who I am and find my real identity. Along with that means find the God of my ancestors and hone in. I don't care what they think about me. When we bring them in, we give them godlike status. Religion is critical. If it wasn't important, they would have never taught us to close our eyes and picture a white man. We're the only ones who say, don't question religion because we have to focus on them. No, they're already in our heads. I'm focusing on spirituality because I'm trying to figure out, well, who's my father's great-great-great-grandfather worship? What kept them alive during that? He lived to be about 85, 90 back then. What kept them alive despite all that ish they were dealing with? They were still praying to somebody, and his name wasn't whatever we call him today. So my thing is, in order, it's like Sankofa, we have to look back to move forward. It has nothing to do with our enemy, because if our soldiers are still broken, their army is going to destroy us anyway. If we don't understand who we are spiritually, how in the heck are we going to figure out who we are intellectually? So, Gary, I'm going to let you on. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. So, Africans talk about Sankofa, which is going back and fetching. And so, but it's interesting. Well, let me tell you what came to mind about religion. Mm-hmm. Firstly, religion, the issue with the religion is that it keeps us separated. And, the other day I made mention that there is no power when we're disconnected. And religion has played a huge part in Africans being disconnected. But what came to my mind is religion is like food, right? And I want you to catch this. Religion is like food. We have spent the last 500 years making poison taste good, right? That's why some of us go to the Garden of Eden, right? Small plug for them. But the reality is, For the last 500 years, we have taken poison, made it taste good,
Really
but
good.
it still killed us. That is my analogy to the religion that they've given to us, right? They have given us a religion that has nothing to do with us as an African people. And somehow, like the food, we have made it relevant, and it's still killing us. That religion is a huge part of the deconstruction of the Black man and the Black woman and the Black child. And many of my friends will disagree. That is just my position. I'm sticking to it. And I won't depart from that. And so, this is why this is such a difficult conversation to have, because we have brilliant brothers, but that division keeps us. And it does matter to our counterparts, to our white counterparts that are racist. That religion, they depend on it. They depend on us to stick to that religion because it literally steers how we respond to them. So it is critical for them.
Absolutely. There's a movie out that was on Stars, HBO, one of them. Then, Brother Keith, I'll let you get on, called American Gods. It was such an interesting film. The central figure was this dude. He's biracial. He's a Black dude. But the whole thing is about the old gods, white gods. They're all competing for the adoration of the people. So it's like the more, and it's like, it's so crazy. The dude that they kicked off, the spider guy, what's his name? Spider, African, come on, you guys know. What's the spider? God. Anyways, the Black God says, when you started, you're already off. The black guy says, he's talking to Black people. He says, the more you worship those gods, the more his people are going to persecute you, because the more you worship that other God, the more powerful he gets and the weaker I get. So it's kind of like the more we worship, my crazy theory, which I can't prove, the more we worship their God, the stronger they get. And the weaker we remain. So I think it's our charge to disconnect. I think once you disconnect, man, you see the world much more clearly. That's just my thing. And it's like people need to disconnect and unplug. And that's the first plug you got to pull out the wall. Brother Keith, was you going to say something?
Yes. I want to say to Gary, like, I'm never offended. I believe, I have my belief because that's how I grew up. But I'm also 58 years old, and I do understand that there's a lot of things that I grew up under that wasn't totally correct. And so I work with anybody that, that can help me, teach me, work with me, walk with me, and regardless of religion, sexual orientation, and anything else you want to throw in the mix, we all are together, because when they stop me, they don't ask me, am I getting a PhD? You understand what I'm saying? They don't care, and they ain't gonna never get around to that.
I was perked up, he said.
And so this is the thing, like, and I believe this. A lot of times, even from a religious standpoint, people will attack us because I know we talked a little bit. D.Moss, you say you grew up in Pentecostal.
Yes,
I grew up under Pentecostal, and a lot of times what people will do, they will prey on your humanity and expect you to always do what's right. My philosophy is this: when you have to deal with people not on your philosophy of life, but on their philosophy of life. And so, like you say, and that's why I don't prescribe to Michelle Obama's edict that when they go low, you go high. I'll prescribe to this because that's not their philosophy. They've been rolling in the mud forever. And we have always had to carry our head high and have our dignity, and they don't have none. And so my philosophy is, you go low, I'm going low. You know, you want to roll in the mud, I'm gonna roll in the mud. You want to act civilized, I'm gonna act civilized. But if you don't, I'm not giving you that pass, because that's what people have always preyed on us about. You know, like I say, if we are going to be accepted in society, then we need to conform. We've conformed and they still don't accept us. We need to get educated. We've gotten educated and they still don't accept us. We need to do this, that, or the other, and they still don't accept. They go as low.
Who's
and
they?
live low.
Who's they? Who's they? They.
White people.
Why do we keep bringing them in a
But
conversation?
I'm just saying from not
I
what we're talking about.
I thought this was a segregated conversation.
It is. But this is what I want to get to.
Talk to me.
Whenever you have to deal with people, you have to deal with them where they're at, not where you want them to be or where you think they ought to be psychologically, physically, mentally, but where they're at. And we have been taught to always, no matter how much we've been hit, to keep your head hung high, and that's it. And so my thing is that in order for us to understand that we have to, as a people, come together. I don't care what walk of life you come from, because like you say, if you come from a predominantly white neighborhood, they want the same thing for you as they want for me from a predominantly black neighborhood. Doesn't matter. And so we got to understand we need to get together and we need to work together and we need to get rid of all of these isms and schisms and the different things that we have felt because we have been told, like you say, you worked in the house and I worked in the field and we can't come together, you know, but we need to get together, you know, no matter where you come from. And so that, because that's the only way we're going to build anything. You know, and so as long as they can, as long as we stay separated from one another, and because I don't necessarily agree with everything you say, I can't rock with you. I don't have to agree with everything you say, but if I see you doing something that's good, I can rock with you. You know, I'm beyond that kind of stuff, where, you know, we got to have the same philosophies. We got to agree on every single thing in order for us to build together. And no, we need to build together, because if we don't build together, we gonna definitely fall together.
Amen.
And it makes no difference where we come from.
I just want to say, brother, Eshe. I agree with everything that you just said in terms of us becoming separatists and working together for our own benefit. I agree.
Well, I agree 100%. I'm still going to say I'm hard-headed. When I think of what the Haitians did during the Haitian Revolution, they went back to what they knew. And you read the stories of the chants and the spiritual songs. You think of the rituals they did right before they went to war with Napoleon's troops, right before they decimated them. They were all on one accord. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that we all have to be on one accord, but I think if we're talking about Black people and what we need to do to self-heal, it's not, for me, it's not about they. I don't care about them. I think when I look at my brothers, I need to say, how do we prevent the next young brother from going through what Heavy went through? He tells his testimony all the time, and it pains me every time. I'm like, damn, what could we have done? And now I'm thinking of all the cats that I grew up with who went through similar situations. Mm-hmm. Many of them are dead right now. Didn't live long enough. So I'm like, what could we have done differently? And for me, I'm like, if we're going to self-heal, there's a number of things that we need to unplug from. And we have to look back to see what they did what our people did effectively to free themselves. Even if it caused them immediate death, they died men. They died women. We're dying dogs and cowards because we refuse to disconnect. When I think of them Haitians and how they disrupted the whole slave economy. When I think of what them folks did in Barbados, I think of the Maroons over in Jamaica. When I think of who they prayed to and how they were all one theological and philosophical accord And when they moved as one. They didn't worry about they. They didn't worry that the British had, the Maroons didn't worry that the British or the English had thousands upon thousands of soldiers getting off them boats. They were all on the same spiritual plane. When one moved, they moved. When they set up strategy, they stuck to it. So I think we have to look back to see what worked. Everything else that we have tried, I see, hey, Angela, she says we need to get beyond that. It's hard to get beyond that because we've been getting beyond things throughout the entire of our lives. Keith is 58. I'm about to be 58. I'm on the latter end of life. I'm in my last chapter.
I've got another 10 years to go, Daryl, to get to 58. So
you have another 10 years?
Get out of here.
I'm simply saying, and I'm not telling anybody what to believe in or what not to believe in. I'm simply saying that we have to do something right. Growing up in a Pentecostal church from date of birth till I woke up when I was in college, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll never go back. My preachers on almost every side of my family, and every time they came to visit or family friends would come, everybody was trying to save me, and I'm like, no, I need to save you. What are you, Muslim? No, I'm not Muslim. I'm trying to figure out who great-great-great-grandma prayed to, because she survived in an environment that none of us would have survived in with all of our religion. They found strength somewhere that we can't seem to find. We can't even have a conversation without bringing white people into the room. And it doesn't mean that I'm racist or anti-white. I just don't want you in my room, in my space right now, while I try and figure out who in the world I am and how to empower my kids and my grandkids. I think that's critical. We can't talk about self-healing without looking at who we are spiritually. We are spiritual beings. And for anybody who undervalues the significance of spirituality, I don't care about religion. When you undervalue the significance of spirituality, yo, man, it boggles my mind. And I definitely don't mean spirituality as it relates to mainstream folks and all them other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to shut up. You guys.
I just want to say briefly, right?
You never say
one
nothing.
One of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm out here in the streets.
Yep.
And so I've been in conversation with people from different sects.
Yep.
Sycamore, all them. I've been in conversation with brothers. And I said to them, forget what you guys don't have in common. I said to them, you guys are fighting each other and you guys have labeled each other's enemies. So they see themselves enemies based upon the section of street they live on. I said, but they're not your enemies. Your real enemies are downtown. And if we get organized, because they got a game, and those of us who are not in the political structure, if we get organized, all of us, you get your people, and we all get organized, and we focus on them, here's what we can do to take over Springfield, just like we took over Essex Block and Walpole, just how we took over this block. We come together, and then in our strength, we organize because they're the enemy. For me, we have an open and avowed enemy. And if you don't respect or notice that you have an enemy, you'll lose every battle. We've already proven we're the most spiritual people in the world, but we're losing battles. My point is, we have an enemy. He's open and avowed since we've been here. The enemy hasn't left. I'm always focused on the opposition. And how do we take out this opposition? The opposition doesn't care if you're from Sycamore, Ave, Knox Street, Maynard. The opposition doesn't care what religion that you have. The opposition doesn't care whose master's degree that you have. The only thing the opposition sees that you are Black and you are a threat to what they're doing. So how do we unite with our differences to take on this enemy? is what we're working on now here in the city of Springfield, to gather up 5,000 people. Trust Daryl, Gary, and us to come together with a slate. And this is who we're going to focus on. And then whomever is the mayor that we get elected, we get to have people running the water department downtown Springfield. We get the people hiring for the trash truck jobs. We get to tell the unions, you don't get to do nothing else here in the city of Springfield unless you have our people at the table, because now we've got people in political office that's going to support our agenda. So, like I said, because we know the history, and I'm just so.
Charles, can I interrupt you for a second?
Go ahead, no, you can go ahead.
Do you think? I mean, you're making some good moves out there, but don't you think it's better to move in silence, because these people are watching us and they're listening? You want to
I'm
give?
glad you asked that question. No, I'm glad you asked, and I put these things out here right like this because there are people who will come amongst us, Brother Rob, who's gonna tell anyway. I believe they're gonna tell anyway. And so this isn't about what Charles is thinking. It's throwing an idea out. And if Charles dies tomorrow, the idea lives now.
Okay.
And that was my whole point. But my point is being like when Gary opened the show with trenches, somebody said that I have to slow down and move with those who are in the trenches. My response is, I am the trenches. We are the trenches. I'm not concerned about the blacks anymore who are not doing no good. My concern is galvanizing our community of black people in this city that nobody speaks to about voting. Nobody's educating about their rights. I'm talking to a group of people that don't know nothing about the NAACP, don't know nothing about the Urban League, they don't know nothing about voting, they don't really care. Those are the groups of men and women those are the people that when I say I speak for them, I speak for more. I speak for people like that.
I run into a lot of street cats too, and I'm not trying to discourage you publicly, but some of them are very politically astute. So some of them are very politically astute, but I dig where you're coming from. I'm gonna say this: if we took all black people, here's why I say, what I say. If we took all black people, we don't deal with our unresolved issues, the things that all of our shortfalls, most of them are due more so to external variables than internal. If we grabbed all of us and we went to another planet, and none of our enemies came with us, not a single one of them. It was just us, millions of us.
We'll be all right.
The Sirius star comes around, the Dogon people say, "Yo, it's back. If you guys are coming, let's go." We go. We're on another planet.
We'd still be sick, brother.
No, sir.
One more time, brother.
I disagree.
We would still be sick.
You know
I
why
disagree.
we would be sick? Tell them why we would still be sick.
Because we're moving with their program. And so this is, so this is where, we can jump in to, in my mind, where you're at. Look, we could, right now we are so sick. If we just think about quote unquote Willie Lynch, right? The work is done. They've done the work. Now we're doing it for us. That was the whole idea behind the Willie Lynch syndrome, right? So if we went to this utopia planet, we would still be sick unless we heal ourselves. So I just want to go back to, for a second, where you were, Daryl, when you were talking about the Haitian Revolution, because that was, we moved from there a little bit too quickly. The idea about our spiritual health is understated. And that is the root. That is the absolute root I'm not talking about. I'm talking about our African spirit health. To be clear, our inner dwelling African spirituality that is not dead, but it's been suppressed. Right now, if we can go back to that, the first thing that we'd understand is it's impossible for us to die. We don't die. So we would not fear leaving the physical body, and we would move and act in a different way. So this spiritual piece that you're talking about, Daryl, it's a big conversation, and sooner or later, if we're going to really break through, that's got to be a centerpiece of how we get it done, by returning to who we are when we was called into existence.
Absolutely.
But this, I don't know that we can get there on this show. And we said it the other day. This is a whole this is a whole series of topics where we should bring the experts in, and I know many of them that will be more than happy to come in and talk about African spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
and who we are and what our journey looked like, and how it was we've been deconstructed from it. It's a very serious conversation, and it's not that anybody is not taking it serious, but this is mission critical, this stuff.
You said something, Daryl, that earlier that stuck with me, and two things. First, you were saying how we need to stop bringing them into our conversation. I wholeheartedly 100% agree. And as you can see, knowing that and knowing the agenda, it still happens in spite of understanding that knowledge. You also said something about us being broken. And, and we are, and from all the things that we've talked about, the way we've come, our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, the nonsense that they had to deal with. Like you said, the reason why folks have self-medicated, the reason why we had a lot of domestic violence in our homes, and all of the different things that have gone on, it's from anger and a broken spirit. And when I deal with our young men in therapy, and especially, our teens and young 20-year-olds, my thing is try to get them to learn how to communicate, because there's a frustration that's always brewing up underneath the surface. And so we have to learn how to communicate so that we don't turn our households into the enemy, our significant others into the enemy, and go through our 20s and into our 30s angry and can't quite figure out why, leaving a slew of bad relationships and children here, there, and the other. And by the time you come to the table trying to figure out what's wrong with me, a decade or two has gone by, and but there's nobody. We have to learn to communicate so that we can communicate with one another, and so that we can come together, instead of the things that are brewing up underneath the surface. I had to learn how to do it, because there was, like I say, folks used to always tell me, oh, there's a lot of, I started out my life and my career as an accountant, and there's a lot of I didn't see a lot of black accountants. The majority of places where I work, a lot of times I was the only one. And then you deal with a lot of other issues, and always trying to prove something that you belong in a system that doesn't want you. And so I wrote something a long time ago, and I think I wrote it on Facebook not too long ago, but I wrote this years ago, and I said, I will never sit at a table where people don't want me. And, so, let's sit at our own table. Let's build our own society, our own infrastructure. But before we can do that, we have to deal with the brokenness that's on the inside. Hell, I'm angry, and we got to deal with that, because we're not going to be any good for one another. Like you said, if we got on that ship, we bringing all that stuff with us. And when we get off that ship, we're going to bring all that stuff with us. And so we got to deal with that so we can heal ourselves, because, there's a lot of self-worth that we've left on the table because we've been told we are worthless. And now trying to mend ourselves and heal ourselves. And you can't do it with a people who don't understand you. And so, Gary, I'm with you on that part. I really am. And I want you to understand that, where I'm coming from.
No, brother, I know that you're with me. I got to go back to the spirit piece again because it's bugging me. At the deconstruction of our families, if you don't know, you should know the very first thing they broke was the spirit. That was their first mission, was to break our spirit. And this is why we need to reconnect to the indwelling African spirit. Mission critical. And then after they broke our spirit, that's when they began to work on all the other dimensions of who we were. That spirit piece, it keeps jumping out because I'm grateful, Brother Darrell, that you raised it, but it's a serious achievement. Understand, when they break your spirit, they break everything else that comes with you.
I can tell you this. I go back, and I never really understood why it bothered me the way it did. But when I watched Roots as a young, I think I was in the 9th grade when it came out, and watched them tie him to a tree and whip him to make him change his name.
Who did they tie, brother?
They tied Kunta Kinte.
Oh, good. I was just making sure you didn't say
to the tree. Yeah, and kept whipping him and told him that his name was Toby until he called himself Toby. You understand what I'm saying? And no, I understand what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying.
And Can I ask a question? And the reason why I asked you the question.
When did that movie come out? Do you remember when that movie came out?
70. It was 1977.
Okay. 1977. We were about 10 years, less than 10 years away from the conclusion of, the SCLC's civil rights movement, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about a movie reminding us of where we came from and what role we need to stay in? Talk about how much happened politically, socially, economically after that movie came out. You want to talk about audio and visual messaging? They killed. We sat around in droves watching an all-black class teaching us how to re-enslave ourselves all over again, as if they weren't already teaching us that we will always be slaves in the classroom. We watch that movie to this day. Every week and talk about Kizzy Chicken. We thought Chicken George was a hero. If he was on that movie, A Soldier Story, he would have got murdered. He would have got killed right along with the dude who put the monkey tail on. So think about that movie. We use it as examples. It's a movie written by a white man, a fictional movie about what he thought. Alex Haley didn't write it. We all know that now. What he thought black life was like on a plantation, and it sticks to us. When they talk about how they cut legs off, raped women, carried us out. Imagine 2022, we're the brave and bold curators of the film industry now. And why can't they recreate a black families who took off? And I ain't talking about Miss Jane Pittman, but folks who fought, bled, died, made it, freed, superhero status. We talk about, I dig what you're saying and where you're going with Roots, but even with Roots, they talk about, they showed Kunta Kinte raising a child up, talking about, actually, I believe he was Islamic. He talked about Allah. They refused throughout the entirety of that series and the second and third series that came afterwards. They never once made any reference to African spirituality. You talk about the folks who came in and conquered most of that northern tip of Eastern Africa and worked their way down. And you talk about the Islamic influence on Africans. They basically did the same thing Christians did. They came in with a sword in one hand, their Quran in the other hand.
Sure.
They left with all the African resources, to the point nowadays we had Henry Gates saying there was even a Nubian pharaoh in Egypt. Duh, brother. There was millions of them. Thousands of them. Are you kidding me? So we're at that point. So when you talk about roots, think about never once one reference to any of the deities. No Shango, no Yemiya, no nobody.
Mhm.
Ask yourself why. These are folks coming off the boat. They never once had anybody playing the drum. They never showed circle worship. They never showed anybody, talking about the Orishas. None of that.
Or
So
the Netchers. Or the Netchers.
say it again.
Or the Orishas or the Netchers.
Absolutely. So
Right.
it's kind of like, talk about that particular film influenced all of us. Every one of us was born in the late 50s and 60s. We are heavily influenced by that film and other Coon films just like it.
Mm-hmm.
They broke us. They took the biggest brother. Heavy would have been made an example of. Oh, that dude got a two-piece, ta-ta, and they down. So they grabbed Heavy out the shack. They beat him. Oh, they may have raped him. They may have done all types of things to destroy his character. And the rest of us are sitting down watching. They got Rob tied. He's 6'6", 300. They done already murdered him and burned him at a tree. Now they got Stokes out. And the rest of us, oh, I'm going back to pick me some cotton. I see when you talk about the breaking of the spirit and how that stuff has carried itself 300, almost 150 years later. You look at Michael Brown dead in the street for hours. Look at Amadou, they left him on the sidewalk in New York, hours. So everybody had a chance to see these dead bodies.
Darryl, you pause.
To that stuff, but I'm on a long tangent.
No, brother, I want you to keep going. I just want you to pause for 1 second because we need to connect the psychological damage to what you just described.
Okay.
And so there has been, if that came out in 75, understand that there was psychological damage done to everybody that viewed it.
Yeah.
Huge psychological damage. Because it didn't show us in any form of being victorious.
Nope.
As you just described. So, it was important to make that connection. This was pure messaging, brilliant messaging from their point of view,
Yep.
and a lot of psychological damage for us.
Absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to say, I was a spiritual savage on all fours, right? And after the Honorable Marcus Garvey was destroyed, and by the way, he believed in, I guess, what would be called the white man's religion, because he believed in Christianity, but he was Marcus Messiah Garvey. And then I think about after Marcus Garvey and what he believed and how he was able to accomplish the great things. And then I went to prison and I was all messed up. I didn't get spiritually whole until I heard the teeth of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, right? And then I heard Malcolm and I heard all of those men telling me that I wasn't a nigger, that I was the original man, that I was God of the universe. And then after I got involved in the Nation of Islam, I was wondering why wasn't everybody in the Nation of Islam? He took drunks, prostitutes, the worst in society, psychiatrists, psychologists. Nothing could understand how this uneducated man with a 6th grade education could take people like Heavy Stokes and change their life. And even with all of that they were doing, it wasn't a rush. After seeing your uncles and aunts and prostitutes and whores and crack addicts turn their lives around and reform, there were people still not rushing to kick that door down. If you could change Heavy Stokes, if you could change True Love Allah, if you could change all of these people, murderers, robbers, and thieves, door should have been kicked open, but it wasn't. My point is, my question is, sometimes it's like exhausting because you see something like the Nation of Islam and what it does and what it's doing for people. And we're not rushing into there. But if we rush into this, the African heritage and deities and all of that, that people, once they recognize that, they're going to rush into the doors of that, and that's going to free them. Some of the greatest black men that was reformed under the teaching of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad in America come out of the Nation of Islam. And it's not like people are kicking the doors then. So is the African spirituality going to be what clicks and everybody's going to run and kick that door in?
That's not the intent of the message. The bottom line, hear me, bro. You took it there, not me. I'm telling you. Let me respond. I'm not debating with you. I mean, we're having a conversation. It's a necessary conversation, and these are conversations that we typically people say we talk about it all the time. We never talk about this.
No, we don't.
Not to the extent in which we're talking about it today. Typically, it's not a part of the conversation when we talk about black people. The Nation of Islam. There are so many people who still have respect for the Nation of Islam. Doesn't mean that, at the time the Nation of Islam was growing, so weren't the Black Baptist Church. So it wasn't that Pentecostal movement. You look at Refuge and the number, and you look at Church of God in Christ, all the Pentecostal denominations that grew out of that grew by millions. So people were changing their lives in a number of places. But at the same time, I look at the state of the black church. It's still stunting the intellectual development of black people. It's still stunting the spiritual and emotional development of black people. My mother them lived and died by it. Let me throw it out there. For them, it changed their lives. For me, I seen people who refused to move forward. Real change wasn't happening. I seen people who didn't get involved in movement. I see people who didn't understand why we needed to pull our kids out of school systems and create our own academic institutions. So the Nation of Islam, I don't want to cause any controversy. I have my own theories, but when you look at the rise in terms of the rise in numbers, and then you look at the decline in numbers, you have to look and see what was taking place at that time. So people make choices based on what they see. People make choices on what inspires them. Who's educating? You're talking religion, we're talking spirituality. If you're part of a religious institution, then if you want to drive numbers, you have to do a better job of you have to educate them. You have to inspire them before you can mobilize them. You can mobilize. Once you mobilize them, you begin to organize them. But then you still have to lead them. You have to have a vision. What's the expected outcome? So there's all these variables that come into play when it comes down to religion. There's so many different religious groups. Jehovah's Witness. I don't understand any person that becomes a Jehovah's Witness. And I apologize to anybody who's watching, but I don't apologize. So, but when you look at their numbers, there are a lot of people who are there and they swear by it. More power to them. Kudos. But the reality is, if we're going to get back, if we're going to have honest dialogue about self-healing, take white people out the picture. Forget organization. Let's talk about, I need to get back to where my ancestors were. When I disconnected from the church, listen, coming to Springfield, not knowing people, but people knew who I were, dogged out, you name it at times. And it's cool. I still walked around with a smile. You know why? I knew who I was. I already made that spiritual break. And I'm still learning about me. But once you get to that point where you're so empowered by who you are and what you are spiritually, and what you done read and researched for yourself, it wasn't for white people. It wasn't for the people who didn't dislike me. I had to become a better spiritual being. So it's okay if you hate on me. You can call me a demon, the devil, sellout, coon, doesn't matter. I still move for my people. And I'm still willing to work with anybody and everybody because I understand that everybody's not in the same space and place. You all have to do a lot of work, internal work. And the hardest thing to do is fight that religious, that programming that they hit us with. Man, listen, we'll die, we'll kill each other over their religion before we go after them for implanting them seeds in our heads. We'll kill each other quick. You want to talk about the enemy? Oh, bruh, I talked to the wrong person the wrong day, wrong time, and I'm done over a stupid conversation over hot dogs. They're not my enemy. They've already grown an army of black folks so that we can kill each other intellectually, spiritually, physically. So we have to do a better job in terms of healing self, which is why when you talk about the conversation of mental health, oh, it's been steady growing across the country. It's been growing. You know why? Because we finally realized black men, despite what everybody else is saying about us, yo, we all need to sit in the chair. We all
Mm-hmm.
sit in the couch. I didn't go through what you went through heavy, but I went through my own trauma. And we all experience trauma. You know, throw that macho stuff to the side. We all went through trauma. And we do this thing where we want to talk about whose trauma was the worst. It doesn't matter. We both got stabbed with dull knives. And it hurts. And the only way to figure out what that trauma is, man, you have to go back and reflect. And you have to take it all the way back to
Mm-hmm.
the source in order to move forward. So while people are talking and arguing over religion, I ain't saying nothing about religion. I'm talking spirituality. Who in the world did my ancestors pray to? What carried them? What made them survive that ship across that ocean? What helped them get through the plantations of, my dad and them folks down in deep Real-Town, Alabama? How did know? Dude, I go down there to visit and I'm looking at all them woods and you can smell death in the air. And I'm like, how in the world did they survive? Well, some of them survived on something that we will never be able to relate to until we throw our ego to the side and start looking back and saying, you know what, I want to embrace who and what they were because they were stronger than I am.
Dow, if you don't mind, I just want to go back to.
My sermon is done, bro. All you.
Well, I just want to go back to one over knowledge, our ego, one over knowledge, our ego, one over knowledge, our ego, and when we believe that we know everything, right? That is what keeps us disconnected. And but what we do know is that we come from a place that had African spirituality. Nobody can deny that. Nobody can deny that we come from a land, that we was a continent that was carved up in 1984 and 85 by Europeans for the resources in Africa, and that we were stolen and kidnapped, and that they broke our spirit or attempted to break our spirit. None of us can deny that. We didn't call anybody God or Allah. I'm not taking a swipe at anybody. We were African spiritualists, and we had 42 principles that we lived by, called the 42 principles of Ma'at. They're all behavior based. All of them are behavior based, and they've taken that from us, and they've given us a different code of conduct. And so now, an example is, don't touch my elect, right? Because, quote unquote, he's the elect of God. I'm not being funny, but that is not an African principle. We have 42 codes of conduct that tells us we should touch the person that's doing wrong, because we're African spiritualists. So that is just stuff that they have used in order to keep us in the position that we're in. And I just want to say the basis of the African Diaspora Mental Health Association, I'm telling you right now, is reconnecting us back to us. So we have those conversations.
Well, I'm already reconnected to me, so I'm good.
Say it again.
I'm already connected to me. I'm good. I'm free. I've never had to, this is all new to me, right? Because I grew up in a place where I never had to code speak. I never had to do any of those things because I lived a life that was out. I never had a job or any of those things. So, like when Gary and I first met, he was a correctional officer. I was in York Street. And the same way I was acting on the streets, I acted in prison. So they put me in special management where I was locked in a cell 24, 23 hours a day for 2 years. So for me, even though I was a spiritual savage, when I got out and I would see people like saying to me, you got to play the game, or you can't, like, when I did what I did with the mayor, it reminded me of the movie I watched again the other day, the Django Unchained. And you can remember when he was beating on the Brittle brother, all the Africans were standing around like this. They were shocked because they never saw that before. So when I was going at the mayor and I was telling him to shut up and stuff, you could look around and everybody was like this. Like they were shocked that somebody would speak like that to Big Daddy. And they were shocked. So I never came from a place where I had to filter myself, monitor myself, or do any of those things. Then when I got knowledge of self and how I got free, I'm just going to speak for me, was through the Nation of Islam and those teachings. And then when I got out of prison, I thought everybody was behaving and acting like we were acting, and I come to find out that they weren't. So it's like I'm thinking no matter what you believe in, you're going to be a slave or not. If you have African spirituality, or if you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, I don't care what you got. If you're a coward and a punk, you're going to be quiet and ain't going to say nothing. If you ain't going to speak out, you're not going to speak out. So there's people who got all of this, yet right here in this town of Springfield, there's nobody advocating, nobody talking about the issues. And I'm like,
you sure about that?
Brother, let me say what I mean by talking about the issues.
Yeah, you gotta expound. Go ahead.
Let me talk about what I'm talking about, the issues.
Okay, go ahead.
90 unsolved homicides of Black residents here in the city of Springfield. We have a school system where Dan Warwick makes $284 million a year. No, $284,000 a year. There are no nonfiction books in Springfield school system that teach about any of the things that we're talking about tonight. I don't hear nobody talking about that. I don't hear nobody galvanize about that. When you look on TV in Minnesota, when people got killed, people were filtering out their houses in curiosity. A young man got killed here. Less than 5 people came out of their house curious enough to see that happen. And so when I say that there's nobody expounding and talking about these issues, and we know it because we don't hear it. And when I say I'm on the ground every day, and I don't see the people out there, when Juanita Batchelor calls and the family calls for people to come out to speak about all the unsolved homicides, nobody.
When you talk about education and the superintendent's salary, we know that the school system, it doesn't matter if his salary is $1 or $500,000. It's never been effective in terms of educating us. Why aren't we? The bigger issue is, why aren't we? What we should be asking ourselves is, why aren't we pulling our kids out of the school system and homeschooling? Why aren't we pulling our kids out of the system and, forming our own educational institutions? So when you say they're not, there are people who are working on that. Everybody, some folks may not be working the way that D.Moss is working. My thing is forming business associations. I want to form a strong, powerful black business block. Central to what we're dealing with in our homes, poverty. Root cause for a lot of it is the economics. Who's out there screaming about economics and equity? And who's looking into our community and saying, no, 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 no. Who's actually building a strong business block? Forget the words. Who's actually putting action plans? Those are the questions we should be asking. Who's putting together action plans so that we can start educating our kids without relying on anybody else? Keep your books. We'll order our own. Keep your money. We have our own business association. We'll get the funds from our own businesses. Who's doing that type of stuff? Medical institutions. We're talking about birthing black mothers. Who's talking about that? Who's bringing all the black birthing professionals together so that when black women go to give birth, they don't have to worry about dying on a hospital bed along with their baby? So sometimes we talk as if nobody else, and this is general conversation, brother. I don't want you to think I'm attacking you because you know.
Oh, brother, I'm not concerned.
You stuck with me until we old gray in the convalescent home looking back and laughing at this stuff. So, but the thing is, there are people doing work. If I didn't know Brother Gary, I would have no idea that ADMA exists. I used to drive down State Street, had no idea what was over there. I just see Dave crossing the street. I didn't know where he was going. But then I'd be quick to say that these are the resources we don't have. So my thing is, I think we have to get to the point where we focus more on the capacities and what we do have. And we have to educate people on who's actually doing what as opposed to saying what we don't have and who's not doing something. Brother Stokes a powerful dude. He's doing his thing. But instead of talking about who ain't working with him, let's talk about who's doing. That way we can organize and create a continuum so that everybody's doing something and put this puzzle piece together. Other than that, we're not doing that. I can beat my chest and say I'm the only one, doing A, B, and C. But I know that I'm not. I just don't know the other people who are doing things. Go ahead.
I just want to know this is the problem this is a genuine problem.
I'm listening.
That I see. We have to prioritize this is what I think. And this is why I roll with the people that I roll with. Because a lot of people think the economic base is the way to go. Some people think the spirituality is the place to go, and all of that. My focus, and this is why I focus on it, is that when you have people look like us murdering each other on the streets of the city of Springfield, and then mothers are crying out for community members to come out, and people, when I say don't come out, it's because when I'm with these mothers and the people that come, they're saying, where's everybody at? Where is everybody at to help us? So what I'm relaying to you is the message that's on these mothers and families' hearts
you're absolutely correct in doing so. And there's times when we've done things and we look, where's everybody at? This is great information. Where's everybody at? This is the type of project we need. We've all been in them shoes. We're working with other parents whose kids aren't killing each other, but they have similar issues. And we're going, where's everybody at? Because we spend more time. When are we meeting with folks to say, okay, who's doing what? The last time I had that conversation openly, aside from this one right here, I was sitting in the office on State Street. It was after I had got let go, and we was in Gary's office. And we said, we need to figure out who's doing what. And we haven't. So just because you may be making the noise right now, it doesn't mean that work isn't being done. When you say, it has nothing, the work with economics has nothing to do with people, black kids or black people killing each other. Man, listen, it goes back down to racism. We're still economically suppressed, so we need to find a way to become self-sufficient. If my son has access to resources, if he has access to, a means of ensuring that he and whoever he goes on to, live with, fall in love with, whoever, can maintain a decent quality of life, he may not go through their kids. My grandkids may not go through what the Heavy Stokes went through. We have to remove those conditions. In order to do that, brother, we have to go down the root cause. I can't, some folks are stretched. Some folks are just lazy. Some folks are cowards. We have classes, different classes, but everybody brings value to a table. Just because that dude's a coward, he might be the finance wizard that I need to make sure that this association works. This dude may be lazy, but there may be something about him. Every time he speaks, people may gravitate to what he does. He may be the person you need. Sometimes it's the messenger. I've always had to go back and check myself. I'm always doing things in the community, and I'm not, we all are. But there's times when people don't come, and I'm like, you know what I did wrong? I did A, B, C, and D. And
No, you came to Springfield.
Huh?
You came to Springfield, no, sir.
You know what? If I wasn't meant to be here, I think the ancestors would have pulled me out of Springfield. I've been trying to leave. I was supposed to only be here for 2 years. It's 24 years later, and I'm here with y'all.
I wish I never came.
Is my job done in Springfield? I just want to move to Atlanta. Won't let me go. So we here. So my thing is, our work ain't done. It's not easy work. People aren't always going to listen, but a lot of it goes back to root cause. Yo, man, we're dealing with that white supremacy. And folks, I heard somebody say the other day, we got to stop blaming white supremacy. It's so embedded in our psyche that we work against ourselves regardless. We'll see Stokes doing something, we'll find 25 reasons not to support him. We'll see Keith Dodd saying something, we'll find 50 reasons not to support him. Dude, it's so ingrained that every time we have problems when we look in the mirror at ourselves. We hate ourselves. So don't take it personal. The person hating you and won't follow you won't follow their own gut instincts. So
that's why I'm dealing with a
conversation.
That's why I for me personally, like I'm not really that astute and stuff. I just got a select group of people that I'm gonna try to work with and help out, and whatever I can do to be assistance with people to help in the cause of freedom, justice, and equality, I'll do it. But like they always say, yo, head man, F them, man, and we're gonna do this, man. We're gonna make a change, man, because like I said, it's personal with me.
Yep. The
Springfield Police Department, the mayor's office, and a lot of these Black people, my elders, who I'm in love with over the last couple of days, we fell out, and I'm saying I can no longer tolerate calling up to you guys because I love y'all. Y'all gotta go. We've been hurting too long in this city. We're not asking no more questions. There's gonna be a revival in this city. And like I said to the young brothers, and we've been talking, man, we're gonna take over, man. We're gonna take this city back, and especially in our communities where we live at and killing each other. This not just to be talking, D. We're gonna take it back, man. And like I always keep you and Gary and Dave and Rob, I always talk about you guys. And I say, man, there's a group of men and we got some women that's willing to help. They don't need to be going to ROCA. They don't need to be going to AISS. They don't need to be going to MHA. They don't need to be doing none of that. We got the resources to help our community. And that's the only thing like I'm focused on. And whatever we can do to help you guys on your end, that's what we're coming to do. But they're gonna pay. They're gonna pay. They get all of them gatekeepers, them poverty pimps, Sano and what's the other dude, Richard Neal, and all of them. They gotta go. No more playing with them. If these young people don't stop killing each other and doing what they gotta do, then they're gonna get what they're deserving. And people are hearing this message, and it ain't gonna be no more of this. We gotta stop it, man. So that's just me. I'm here to help you brothers in anything I can do, but it's personal, man.
It ain't personal no more. You just put it out for everybody. It's public. Watch out for Heavy Stokes.
Brother Keith Dodds.
Yes, sir.
What I want to say to my brother is come join our team, man. You're a brother. You are professional. You have the degree, and we can pay you what you're being paid working for whoever you're paying for. Come work for us. That's what I would say. And that is an invitation to all our brothers and sisters that are out working there in the field as mental health professionals. Come join our team. When Daryl talks about building our own institutions, this is what we're doing. We are building our own mental health institution, soon to follow substance abuse, soon to follow physical health. We have to build our own team. And I would like to invite my brother to come work with family.
That's dope.
That is dope.
That's dope.
Wow, that's good, man.
It's critical that we build. I know the time is 11:50. We got here in 10
That's
minutes.
up.
Ooh, Lord.
I'll probably get in trouble because I don't think I played a card.
You didn't play a card. You didn't play no music.
This conversation was just soul food for me. It's critical that we continue to build, because while they're focusing on the mental health institutions and all the support cycles around it, we still need economic organizations. We have arts and culture working on it, developing it. Scholars Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Too many young kids to count. Thank you, Keyshawn. Developing that. We need our own educational institutions. And all these, it's not like anything can operate alone. When we start talking about, the Black Business Block, oh man, these folks are going to need the help of ADMA and groups like ADMA, because I'm telling you, the social stressors that you deal with in trying to build and maintain a business, build and maintain a household, they're all interacted. And sometimes we look as if we try and treat it as if they're separate chains. Separate links on a chain. Man, we're all links.
Yes.
And we have to focus on making sure that we strengthen the linkages, and make sure that, we have a continuum. It can't just be one or the other. So when you talked about the spirituality, Brother Stokes, I want to make sure I'm really clear. People need to do what's in the best interest of them. My thing is, I'm not talking religion. Spiritually, everybody needs to find themselves. If you're going to move forward, find out who you are. It's part of the whole I am and who am I. So this is just work that we all need to do. For everybody listening, for the folks who have been on this live the whole time, for the folks bouncing in and out, I just want to say thank you. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead, our guest, Minister Stokes, Keith Dodds, Brother Gary Porter. Just closing thoughts, man. Start with you, Brother Stokes. We only got about 3 minutes left. Go for it.
I just want to say again, thank you, Daryl, for allowing me the opportunity to come on your platform. I want to say to all my brothers, especially Keith, one time I had to kid with your brother Keyshawn because I really didn't know who he was, right? And then I found out and I said, oh, I know why. He was on the porch. He wasn't able to come out and play. So I didn't know who he was, Keith, and he didn't know me. And he didn't know how close we are. But in Springfield, you're 2 people away from being related to everybody. So now that I know that you're his big brother, I want him to know that I love him just like I love y'all. Peace.
All right. Thank you, sir. Brother Dodds.
Thank you, Charles and David. Thank you for the invitation. We will definitely be having conversations. One of the things that I hear here, and something that I got out of this, is that we have to stop being fragmented. It's like you said, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, but as long as we're fragmented, there's no power. And so, it's time for us, like you said, to come together and work together to promote us together from all different parts of this society. Like you said, I drove down the street many a times, and I didn't know until, probably 3 or 4 years about African Support, the organization there. I didn't. And so so it's time for us, but I also had some things I had to get together so I can be a viable member and strength for our society. So so that we can do some things together. And I appreciate the offer. And yes, I'll be coming to see you.
Okay. The
All right.
takeover.
Brother Gary.
Yeah, so brother, I appreciate that, and as we think about the state of our mental health, part of that is the fear of working for another brother or another sister. That is a real fear because we have been indoctrinated in a way that all money flows through them. And so we have built this thing, and the reality is we pay more than them. That's the reality, And so I appreciate, Brother Darrell, when you talk about the business block, because we're not just a mental health institution, we're also part of this economic development.
Absolutely.
Brothers and sisters are purchasing homes, but they've got good mental health when they go home to their families because they're working under an organization where there are no stresses. And so, it's a serious invitation. And, and I just, to Brother Stokes, man, we love you. I love you. Continue to do the work that you're doing, but also to Brother Darrell.
Yes.
And to Brother Rob.
Yes.
Rob out of this equation. The work that you're doing, brother, is mission critical. You're actually doing the work of a convener, where you are actually convening these conversations and bringing us together under a roof, our own.
Yes.
That is critically important. And, and we have to, we've got to see that, and we've got to thank you for doing that work, brother. Every time that you do something like this, you're moving us as a people down the road of success.
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you, brother.
Thank you, Darrell.
You're welcome. Well, and for the critics who say I'm aligning myself with people again because they're on the platform, y'all should join us.
Hey, for those critics, come on the show.
Listen, I know I apologize, everybody. Look, I make light of things because humor is a good thing, so I like to laugh a lot.
Come on the show.
I like to laugh at the people on the sidelines taking the pot shots. It's like, bring it, because we're getting stronger every day. And that's it. So with that being said, I want to say much love, much peace, much respect to everybody. This is Monday Night Live with D.Moss.
Yeah.
My girl MBS Malay said she was going to sit out the serious conversation. She wants to be here to talk about relationships and music. And I dig that part because we're all about relationships. So, gentlemen, I want to say thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Stay strong, everybody. We all in this together.
Good night.
Good night, Springfield. Best of luck to you. We here.